Coming up on tonight's episode of Faith versus Culture, the future of the church in light of a high-profile arrest of a pastor in Canada. We'll have that and more coming up next.
To have sex before you marry is a bad idea.
Don't tell me there's no such thing as gun violence.
That just depends on your definition of when life begins.
There are problems of sin and habit that cannot be solved outside the person of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Well, hello and welcome to this episode of Faith versus Culture right here on the CBN News Channel. My name is Dan Andros. I am the managing editor of faithwire.com. I'm joined as always by author and pastor Dale Partridge. Dale, what's going on?
Hey, brother, excited to be here. We have a lot to talk about. I think the landscape for the church is changing faster than we expected, not just culturally, but politically. And I think we're seeing this not just here in America, but especially in Canada, as we just witnessed the recent arrest of Pastor James Coates there in Alberta, or I guess I should say Edmonton, at Grace Life Church. And so I think I actually just recently spoke with Pastor Coates' wife, Erin, and I asked her, directly, I said, do you think that your husband's arrest is indicative of the inauguration of an era that's coming for the church where pastors will be imprisoned if they don't submit to government regulations or orders put on the church, whether it be for COVID, whether it be for gender regulations, things we might see through the Equality Act, whether it's other matters altogether. And she said, absolutely, yes, we need to be prepared for the coming season of the church. So lots to talk about in this episode. Yeah.
And just for those who are not aware, Pastor James Coates, as Dale said, up in Canada, what happened was that the authorities there started putting on these restrictions, a lot of them arbitrary, such as 15% capacity. Clearly no specific scientific data to back up some of these restrictions. And so he said it was essential to continue worshiping in person. And so they did that, and they were over the recommended number there imposed by the government. And at first I think he got a warning, then he did it again the next week. And so they arrested him. And, Dale, it's interesting because, and he's still in jail now. And actually, I think the next weekend after he was arrested, they continued services and had an even bigger turnout. I don't think anyone was arrested there, but it's while it's not America, usually Canada, Europe, they're usually a couple steps ahead of us, and we're always kind of following along the lines of them in many ways. So I think what's interesting here, Dale, is that I've seen several people point this out, that Christians in persecuted areas, they're never arrested for preaching the gospel. They're never arrested for sharing the name of Christ. What they're arrested for are breaking the government rules. In China, for example, the churches have to be government approved. And so if you're worshiping, they don't say, well, you're worshiping Jesus. What they say is you're not doing it with a government permit. And so to your point about the conversation you had with Pastor Coates' wife about the future of the church and what's going to happen, where do these restrictions stop if we don't stand up now to these things? To restrictions on our freedom to worship, and we just say, we've got to just bow, Romans 13, we've got to bow down to whatever the government says there, we got to submit. Well, the government is not the ruling authority of the church, so there's a yes and no there. I don't think it's so black and white on that issue, right, Dale?
Yeah, I'm actually looking something up right now. Just I believe, I should know my church history a little bit better than this, but I'm pretty sure it's the Great Ejection in the 1600s is really made up of pastors that are unwilling to submit to the church's, the state church's mandate on how they should worship. And, they had to use the common book of prayer. They had to put on the vestments. There was a variety of different regulations that they were placing upon these pastors, these Puritan, Presbyterian, Reformed pastors. and many of them would not yield or would not submit to those regulations. And as a result, they were imprisoned. Their churches were shut down. Some of them were martyred. And so this is exactly historically what happens. So yeah, we have this misunderstanding of persecution in the West.
Yeah.
And we need to look back through church history and see this is actually not much different, if different at all, than those types of experiences. Now, so with Pastor Coates, I actually just recently on my podcast, Real Christianity, interviewed his wife for about 30, 40 minutes, just released yesterday. You can listen to that interview with a comprehensive kind of understanding of that, what happened there. But he turned himself in because they were going to come to his house and arrest him. They bring him there. They arrested him without bail. And he's they cuffed him, ankle cuffed him, put him and he's now being quarantined and under Canada's really intense quarantine regulations. He gets about an hour a day of time outside of his cell. He has limited time to talk to his family. Pastor Coates, he's got his doctorate from the Master's Seminary under John MacArthur. He's a man that's got a backbone, standing for truth. He's an expository preacher. He did a great sermon on Romans chapter 30 you can listen to just a couple weeks before he was arrested, talking about what does the Bible say about submission to government? Where do those boundaries lay? And you can listen to that there as well. And so lots of good conversations. But I think on the other side of the break, it'd be good for us to talk about, well, what do we do as the church to anticipate what's coming? And how do we kind of get our bearings straight? I'm not talking about prophecy. I'm talking about predictions, using wisdom, using knowledge, using church history to say, what can we expect in the coming years in the Western church?
Yeah, we will do that on the other side of the break. And, I think as Christians, we would be naive, as you mentioned, with the Equality Act passing, and just the general tenor of the conversation here in the United States as it is directed at Christianity. We've talked about this, Dale, no longer favored status. I mean, I think that is pretty much clear, but I think we've got a plan for the inevitable, which is, as we alluded to, restrictions beyond these COVID measures. I think we can expect to see more and more of that in the future. So we'll break down how the church can start to plan and start to build a foundation for a future when we're going to have a big target on our backs. We'll do that on the other side of the break. This is Faith versus Culture. Back in just a second.
Come home to the sounds of Southern Gospel from CBN Radio. You'll enjoy a rich Southern blend of bluegrass, classic gospel, and Southern gospel favorites like the Gaithers, the Crab Family, and bluegrass sounds like Mountain Faith. So make yourself at home with the all-new CBN Southern Gospel. Now available at cbnradio.com.
It's about the competition.
I kind of put that pressure on myself, and I think people had expectations.
It's about overcoming.
We use this phrase all the time, keep chopping, keep practicing hard.
It's about going the distance.
I think as a father, it's my job, to lead. Just be the best husband and father I can be.
Watch Going the Distance with Sean Brown Saturday night at 7:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
All right, we are back on Faith versus Culture. Dan Andros here, Dale Partridge there. I want to encourage you guys to comment, to email us. You can do that at contact@faithwire.com. But if you're watching on one of our social channels, go ahead and comment on there. We skim through those, we check those, and we appreciate your guys' questions, comments, even those criticisms. We can take it. We're grown men. Feel free to levy whatever you want our way. We'll take it. So, Dale, what do we do here with the future of the church? Because we can't just sit here and assume that the government is going to be our happy little friend all the time, and that they're going to stand up for the First Amendment and for our right to worship as we see fit. So what should we be doing?
Yeah, this is good. I actually just released a post on our ministry, relearn.org, on our Instagram account, talking about the future of the church. It might be on the screen, but this really is kind of a two-dimensional thing. We need to be looking at this from two different angles as Christians. One is that the institutional, traditional church, the historic church, is a sinking ship in some degree, right? In one sense, meaning that I don't believe in 5 to 10 years that the church will be gathering, the biblical church, the one that's committed to Scripture, will be gathering in federally sanctioned and state-regulated 501c3s with leases and bank accounts and employees under the terms, operating under the new upcoming legislation that is presented in the Equality Act that passed as we are recording this now. In the House. We're waiting for those results to see in the Senate. So I don't think that's the future of the biblical church. I think there's going to be a lot of pushback there. The Supreme Court cases I think are going to be on a rise. So we have one side where there's a bit of a sinking ship or a burning building. And now we don't want those men that are captains of those ships or that are the owners of those buildings, the shepherds of those people in those buildings, to just abandon the building or abandon the ship, right? We want them to stay there and to stand strong, and we want to prepare and pray for those men for the coming resistance and the very real imprisonment that will likely happen in the next 5 to 10 years. As we approach these changes in our politics and in our culture. Now, on the other side, so this is two-dimensional, right? On the other side, we have to be building a place for the church to go when they can no longer gather the places that they do now, right? So we have two sides, right? We need to stand strong with those pastors that are going to go down with the ship, but we also need the lifeboats that are being prepared to take care of the flock. And those are the missionaries that are going to go out and plant biblical house churches. You guys know, if you've listened to this show for long, that's our ministry, right? We plant biblical house churches at Reformation Seminary. That's our training program. And this is our ministry. And I feel like we've been gearing up for this time for many years, but it's approaching. I don't know if it's here right on our doorstep quite yet, but it's coming. And I think it'll be sooner than we expect. So ultimately, Dan, what I'm saying is that we have two sides. We need to pray for those pastors to stand strong, and we need to also pray that the Lord raises up missionaries to go start planting biblical house churches. So when these churches go under, and when these churches and pastors get in prison, and these churches can no longer gather, there are hundreds, thousands of biblical house churches for people to go to when their current places of worship are no longer.
Yeah, it makes me think of a story from China that one of an American pastor who does some work with Christians in China, and talking about how they have, a lot of them have no choice but to meet in this way, and really in secret actually, and a lot of them, they started doing a Bible study on one of the books in the New Testament. I forget which one, but the point of the story was, they didn't have Bibles with them, and when they met in this secret location at somebody's apartment, somebody's house to do church, and the pastor opens up and says, well, do you need a Bible from somebody? And they're like, no, we memorized this section. So they would like pretty much kind of divvy up the memorizing, or memorize as much as they could, because that's the level that it's at in China. Now, I don't know if it'll ever get to that level in America, but I think we can expect to see some pushback. The things you said, I really do think there's a good chance that at some point, you know, with the Equality Act and things of that nature, that there is going to be a push to try to make it basically against the government regulation. You're not going to be able to keep your church doors open if you're preaching only the standard biblical definition of marriage. You know, I can easily see those sorts of situations where, you know, you might have activist couples coming in, same-sex couples, just like they're going into a bakery. They might do the same thing in a church. And if that church, if they say, hey, look, I'm sorry, our church is a biblical church. We believe marriage is between a man and a woman, and so we can't marry you. Then they take that to court. You know, I can see the same things happening. I don't know if it will, but I think we should prepare for it. And so, what does it look like, Dale? You know, what can people do if they're thinking about these steps? Maybe if you're a small church or even a bigger church, you know, maybe there's steps they can take as preventative measures, maybe getting small groups, getting a little more maybe solidified. What are some steps people can be taking in the church?
Yeah, we've actually had several ministries reach out to us, and we've been offering free consultation on helping them think through these strategies of basically decentralizing their church, deconstructing a portion of their church so that they can prepare a house church network, and training up pastors by the dozens, so that they can have a diversified network of churches, so that when that time comes, they're not going, wow, we can't gather this week without, you know, the pastor got imprisoned, and then the next pastor is going to get imprisoned, and it just becomes a situation where they're going to need basically that escape plan, that emergency escape plan, to shift and strategize. And it takes several years to build that out. So this is something that a lot of churches, I think, are now. We've had several large churches reach out to us over the last 6 months, having discussions about these matters. And I think we're still thinking through a lot of those opportunities and ways to do that. But we have had enough conversation that we can give some direction. But yeah, it is a decentralizing and a deconstructing, faithful deconstructing. You don't want to let your flock just scatter because of bad planning. And so there is going to be a transition era of wisdom in preparing for the season to come.
All right. Well, we're going to have more on this topic, including some biblical discussion here. Dale, I wanted to spend a couple minutes on Romans 13 because it's such a blunt verse or chapter that people are throwing to just sort of, you know, have churches sort of, oh, well, just throw their hands up in the air. Romans 13, got to submit. So we'll tackle that and more coming up on the other side of the break. This is Faith versus Culture. We'll be right back.
Too often we carry baggage from our past. You know what it's like. It affects everything and everyone in our lives. It's always there, weighing us down and keeping us from achieving true happiness. But do you know God never meant for us to be trapped in the past? You can be free of your baggage. Learn how God's forgiveness leads to changed lives and new beginnings. Call the 700 Club.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Wednesday night at 8:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Tikkun Olam.
This is our nature as a country.
To make the world a better place.
Literally, we felt the earth shaking.
The Christian Broadcasting Network presents To Life, how Israeli volunteers are changing the world.
This film needs to be seen by everyone.
I was in tears.
Now you can own the inspiring documentary To Life on DVD.
There is blood on our hands if we know and we walk away.
I'm so grateful that this film was made.
To Life can be yours for a gift of $10 or more. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com.
We know that every minute counts to save life.
It'll bless
Israel, but it'll also bless all the friends of Israel.
Discover the untold story of how Israeli volunteers are making the world a better place. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com to get your copy today.
All right, we're back on Faith versus Culture. Dan Andros here, Dale Partridge there. Don't forget you can contact us by just simply emailing contact@faithwire.com. Make sure you subscribe to all of our social channels on Facebook, on YouTube, both on CBN News, where this program airs on the CBN News Channel, and also on FaithWire on our Facebook and our YouTube channel as well. So you can find it all there, and we would be grateful if you followed us. So Dale, we're talking about this Pastor Coates situation in Canada. Christians here, as our conversation is focused on, need to be focused on the potential for this in the future, watching what the government's doing. So I wanted to spend a couple minutes on Romans 13, because a lot of Christians and church leaders are just saying, look, Romans 13, we got to submit to the government here. But at what point do we use discernment and say, no, Romans 13 isn't just this blanket thing that we just do whatever the government tells us to do?
Yeah. So, Romans 13, there's a lot of things that the government will tell us to do that we don't want to do, but doesn't make us disobedient to God. Right. For example, paying taxes is one of them, right? We don't like to do that, especially in a culture that may be against the church. Scripture would say, no, give to Caesar what is Caesar's. But we do have a principle in Scripture that we aren't to obey the government in any moment that it forces us to disobey God. And, again, we can use an extreme example. If the government required you to, have an abortion, you wouldn't be required by God to submit to that governing authority, because it would call you to be disobedient to him. And so situations that are going on with these pastors have biblical duties. We'd have to do a pretty long episode on breaking down the, ecclesiological convictions and duties and responsibilities of 1 Timothy 3, Titus 1, shepherds in the church, men that are called, their hands have been laid upon them. They've been ordained, appointed to a position to shepherd the flock. And these situations, even with COVID, when it says 15% of the church can gather, if only 15% of the church can gather, then the church can't gather. That's just the point. And so, are you going to do 9 services a day? No, you're not going to do that. That's impossible. And, it says that, in Canada, you can't sing. You can't actually have another family talk to another family. When the scriptures are built upon the idea of one another's. And again, when the evidence is not in, there's like, I don't have the stats in front of me, but it was like 0.01% of people that are having COVID in that area. And there was no cases reported the entire last year from this church. And so there's not any evidence that really supported those types of mandates, as we're starting to see all over the world. I mean, even we're seeing now lockdowns be removed here in England. I saw the Prime Minister just recently make an announcement of doing that as well. And so I think there's some authoritarian, draconian mandates that are being placed on churches, while Target and Walmart and airlines can pack in thousands of people, but the church can't. And we're releasing felons and people that, because of COVID, and we're jailing pastors, the men who actually, in my opinion, need to be out in the culture right now. We have more suicides, more depression, more marriage counseling issues, more issues with pornography, more issues with parenting, more issues with alcoholism and different types of addictions, more issues with financial loss. I mean, there is so much out there, and the pastors are the ones that get into the lives and do the counseling with these men and women. And we're actually taking one of those men, and James Coates, and we're imprisoning him. And so this is just an insanely backward situation that we're dealing with, morally speaking.
Yeah, and that was a great string that you went on there, Dale. And I think if you question in your mind whether church is essential or not, in the midst of a pandemic, for the reasons you mentioned, I would say you'd have to check your heart, or check your church's pulse. If you're not engaged in all of those things, then maybe your church isn't essential and you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing over there. But your church should be essential for all of those reasons that you mentioned, Dale. And I think it's very interesting when you talk about Walmart and Target and we got to be able to get out to those stores, but hey, don't meet at church this week. Don't sing at church. To underscore the point, Dale, about what you're talking about preparing and having these home churches and networks ready to go, they made an example of the church in many cases, in many states. It's almost like they wanted to make an example of the church. And so who knows what the next time will be, but we shouldn't be unprepared for it at all. So, all right, Dale, we are running out of time here, so we're going to take a break. We'll be back right after this.
It's the new Superbook Bible app. It's packed with games, activities, and Superbook episodes that you can watch for free. Oh, no! There's trivia, a fun daily devotional, and answers to your Bible questions. Plus, an easy-to-understand Bible the whole family will enjoy. You can even create your own Superbook character. Ta-da! It's the new Superbook Bible app. Free downloads on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon.
On the home front.
Thanks for joining us for CBN's On the Home Front, where we highlight what the men and women of America's military do to defend our country. CBN honors the men and women in our military with an initiative called Helping the Home Front. It partners with churches across the country to meet the needs of their military families, from repairing homes to wiping out medical bills for wounded veterans.
Wednesday at 3 on the CBN News Channel. Get Protect Your Sleep and discover how to improve the quality of your life. A free DVD or booklet from the Christian Broadcasting Network.
If you're not a great sleeper, you can do things to make yourself a great sleeper. If you're already a pretty good sleeper, you can enhance your sleep and be even better.
5 leading experts help remove the obstacles between you and restorative sleep.
When you don't get a restful night's sleep, you wake up with an accumulation of stress.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com to get your free DVD or booklet today.
Everything you do better with a good night's sleep.
You'll discover how food affects your sleep, how to put insomnia to rest, explore effective remedies for sleep apnea, and much more in Protect Your Sleep. Wake up to your best life and get Protect Your Sleep today. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com to get your free DVD or booklet.
All right, that is all the time we have for this episode of Faith versus Culture right here on the CBN News Channel. God bless you. Thank you for watching. We'll be praying for you and your church and the entire church throughout the world as we go forward into new and uncharted territory with restrictions and really targets on our back as Christians. So we'll be praying. God bless you. See you next time.